On the 14th of June, two governments that spent months trading missiles and threats quietly put their names on the same document. The United States and Iran digitally signed a preliminary memorandum, basically a written promise, aimed at stopping the major fighting, reopening the world's most important oil choke point, and beginning the removal of the warships that had been choking off Iran's ports. And the first question almost everyone asked was the same one: will it actually hold? Here's what the deal says. In plain terms, the two sides agreed on a framework aimed at formally ending the major fighting in what's being called the 2026 Iran War. They agreed that the Strait of Hormuz would reopen, a narrow channel between Iran and Oman that, at its tightest, is only about 21 miles across. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil normally passes through that one gap, and the United States agreed to begin lifting its naval blockade after the formal signing. In return, Iran promised things too, but I'll come back to that. The preliminary document was signed digitally on the 14th, with a formal ceremony set for the 19th of June in Switzerland. As of the 16th, the full text still hadn't been published, so the ink, or the pixels, is barely dry. So why now? Why would two sides that had been shooting at each other suddenly sit down? Because both of them were running out of good options. For the United States, a long military standoff in the Gulf ties up ships, burns cash, and pulls focus away from everything else Washington would rather be handling. What it wanted was a way to step back without looking like it lost. Iran wanted the blockade gone and the strikes to stop. Its economy was being squeezed by sanctions, penalties that cut a country off from global trade and money, and its leaders wanted some of that pressure lifted. Earlier in June, Iran fired missiles at Israel after Israeli strikes on Beirut, and both sides traded more hits while talks went nowhere. At some point, the cost of doing nothing got higher than the cost of cutting a deal. Now, the specifics. Because the specifics are where these deals live or die. The relief is supposed to happen in stages, not all at once. But the money is already disputed. An Iranian official said frozen assets would be released. Trump said Iran would not be handed cash. Iran committed again to not building or buying nuclear weapons, and both sides gave themselves a 60-day window to work out the harder nuclear details. Diluting some highly enriched uranium is being discussed for a future agreement, not as a completed step today. Oil prices fell sharply once the announcement landed, although they were still above pre-war levels on the 16th. Here's the thing I think a lot of the coverage rushed past. This whole conflict kept circling back to one strip of water. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a shipping lane, it's a choke point, a spot so narrow and so important that whoever can threaten it holds real leverage over everyone else. Picture every car in a city forced through a single tunnel. Block the tunnel, and nothing moves. That's Hormuz for oil. Tankers carrying crude from Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran itself all have to thread through that same gap. So when things got tense, Iran could squeeze the strait, slow it down, restrict it, make insurers nervous, and oil prices everywhere would twitch. But it's a card that cuts both ways, because Iran's own oil goes through there too. choke the strait too hard, and Iran chokes itself. Meanwhile, the US had warships blockading Iran's ports, cutting off the trade Iran leans on. Iran couldn't close the strait forever. The US couldn't force a surrender by sea. A deal was the only exit that didn't slowly bleed them both. So who actually comes out ahead here? The US gets to claim a win. The fighting may stop, the oil route may reopen, and it can point to Iran's nuclear promise as a proof it got something real. Iran, on the other hand, gets a route toward having the blockade lifted, possible sanctions relief, and crucially, it's still standing. For a government whose top priority is survival, just being there at the end counts as a win. The side that's quietly unhappy is Israel. Israel has spent years treating Iran and its allies, groups like the Hezbollah, an armed political movement based in Lebanon and backed by Iran, as direct threats. A deal that eases pressure on Iran looks, from where Israel sits, like letting the other guy off the hook. But once the US decides it wants out, Israel has far fewer ways to stop Washington from signing. The deal comes in phases precisely because nobody fully trusts the promise. Why should you care if you're nowhere near the Gulf? Because that 21-mile gap reaches into your life in quiet ways. When oil gets more expensive or just less certain, the cost of moving everything goes up. Fuel, shipping, the goods on the shelf that travel to get there. Countries that import most of their energy feel it first, but it spreads. There's also the bigger signal. For months, the story out of the region was escalation. More strikes, more risk. A credible step the other way, even a shaky one, changes the mood for shipping companies, insurers, and governments planning around the Gulf. Calm is cheaper than chaos. Even the chance of calm is worth something. So what happens next? The first real test is in the signing ceremony on the 19th. That's the easy part. The photo op. The real test is the strait itself. A few tankers have begun moving, but most shippers are still waiting for proof that the route is safe, including reassurance about possible mines. If traffic rises and insurance costs ease, the deal earns a quiet vote of confidence. If one thing flares, like a seized tanker, a stray missile, the whole thing wobbles. Then comes the harder stretch. That 60-day window on the nuclear details. Iran has every reason to move slowly while still seeking sanctions relief. The US wants visible, verifiable steps it can show off back home. Israel matters here too. If it decides the term leave Iran's allies too strong, it could act on its own, like another strike in Lebanon, a move against Hezbollah, and force everyone to react. That's the loose thread most likely to unravel the whole thing, because it's the one Washington controls the least. Here's where I land. I foresee this memorandum mostly holding in the short term. The strait gradually reopens and the guns stay quieter for now, because right now both sides need the calm more than they need the next fight. But I think the deeper nuclear deal inside that 60-day window is more likely to sleep, get watered down, or quietly stall than arrive cleanly on schedule. The easy part is stop shooting, reopen the route, and that is doable. The hard part, two governments trusting each other on nuclear weapons, is the part history keeps tripping over. The signal I'm watching most closely is what happens between Israel and Hezbollah. If that front stays restrained, the deal has room to breathe. If major strikes return, the calm probably doesn't survive. I want to tell you what I actually think, and you may not agree with it. These memorandums get treated like endings, but in fact, they're not. They're just pauses, useful, valuable pauses, but pauses nonetheless. The reason this region keeps producing deals that fray isn't the people signing them are foolish. It's that the distrust underneath never signs anything. Paper can stop the shooting, but it can't make two governments believe each other. So the relief deserves an asterisk. This is real progress. It's just not the finish line everyone's calling it. For now, a 21-mile strait that pulled the US and Iran to the edge of a wider war is scheduled to reopen under a preliminary deal. And the next 60 days will tell us whether that document can become something sturdier. That's where I land, and I'd love to hear your read on this. Let me know in the comments if you got something out of this. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next video.